Yeah, do you see the feet coming out of the water there? Oh no, I'm gonna, sorry, I gotta share my screen.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't see anything.
Tell me when you do.
Okay, I see it.
Okay, so what I'm the most interested in here is how the feet are leaving the water, okay? I knew this up here wasn't going to work out, but that if we got another pose that we could transpose those legs onto, we could make this work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so looking at these, I want to go through all these with you and let you know my thought behind this. Now, first of all, she had jumped several times, so this water's kind of muddy coming up here, so it's not really attractive. I'm going to go to an earlier shot with her coming out of the water. Right here, it's coming out. The feet are coming out pretty good, but that could still be thought of as maybe like she's on tiptoe. Now here we can see them actually leave, and I like this, okay? So what I want to do now is I'm going to go ahead and select this photo to edit, okay? I'm going to crop it a little bit just to straighten up that horizon line. And what we're going to do is try to transpose a body that looks better, maybe not as, you know, on the top of this, not that it looks bad, but just the clothes are wrinkled and everything. I want to get more of a, almost like she's coming out of the water, like ascending. Okay, so I'm going to open this in Photoshop. We're in Lightroom now. I'm going to go to Photo, Edit in Photoshop CC. We're going to go ahead and let that open. Is this making any sense? Go ahead and ask questions if you have any as we go. It doesn't, you don't have to, but if you have. So, but, and again, this might not be something that worked out. When I was shooting, I tried to get as many angles as possible to make this work. And so, let's see here. I'm going to try to close some of these out. I'm going to have to go in and open again. I have Photoshop open there. So.
How deep is the water there? Is that just like covering a surface or? Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start this over. Okay, so my thought process behind this shoot was to, I've done all these reflection shots this year, and I wanted to show somebody coming out of the water. So first of all, I had to have somebody who's willing to jump in the water. Now keep in mind, this is about 6 inches of flooded parking lot, okay? And that's why everybody's seen a lot of water images this year, is because we have it. Now this is Nebraska. It's not a huge, there's not a lot of options as far as going out and getting things, right? So if we have the water and we're able to get the smooth reflection off of that flooded parking lot, I'm going to get it. But I thought, gosh, wouldn't it be neat? I just had this idea in my head if we could show a girl almost coming out of the water. So all I did was shooting 6 frames a second at 1.2. Keep in mind I'm adjusting my exposure and looking at it. So she had to jump several times, okay, till I could get it right. What I'm really interested in here are the legs and the feet, okay, because I also had her in some other poses just standing there at the same angle, knowing I could take that body and transpose it over the top, okay? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open this image in Photoshop. I'm going to go to Photo, Edit in Photoshop CC, and then we're going to go through and look at some of the other images that we could possibly put on top as far as the torso. That's, you know, doesn't have all the wrinkled clothes and all that. Are you able to see all this pretty well on your screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, cool. All right, great. So next thing we're going to do is look through torso. I pre-selected this just because I didn't want to have to go through all these. Some of these shots were muddy. These are the legs I want to use. I think the splash detail is great. Shows the feet coming out of the water. The next thing we have to do, though, is go select the torso for this, okay? So these are the jump shots. What I have to do, I had her do it from the front and the back, but we're going to edit a front one this time. I'm going to come through these, and I'm going to find a torso that works that we can put on the bottom of those legs where the clothes are nice and smooth. This one's cute, although I want more of an ethereal expression. This one is okay, but I'm not crazy about hand posture. I think this is gorgeous. I think we're going to try this one, okay, because this almost has that look that she's ascending. And we've got similar leg positions. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Photo, Edit in Photoshop CC. And we're going to take our time trying to get this torso to come on here and hopefully match up to the legs we have. And just because we're going to try it, this is really from scratch. It doesn't mean it's going to work. That's another thing I want people to know is that I'm not always successful. I try a lot, I fail a lot, and that's really the secret to this. But when it works out, it works out. All I did was I grabbed my lasso tool up here in the upper left hand of our Photoshop toolbar, and I'm using CC. I went ahead and selected this on a duplicate layer, and I'm going to go ahead and hit mask. Okay. From here, I'm going to select my top layer. I'm going to go grab my move tool, grab the torso, move it into our other image, and try to place it over the legs. Let's say, one thing I want to do is make sure we get the proportions correct, okay? And this is going to be tough, so I'm going to go ahead and lower the opacity on this torso. And I just want to, I realize that the arms and legs probably aren't going to match up as far as shape or anything like that, but I want to make sure that I don't have to I want to make sure I don't have to make the size of her torso bigger. And if I was at the same focus plane, which I think I was, I shouldn't have to. We should be very close. But just judging from here, the hands look just about right. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and go back up and just go back to 100% opacity. I'm going to select my black mask. I'm using a Wacom tablet here too, by the way.
Okay.
So that's why you're seeing me. It's probably with just a little bit more control. What we want to do is take all the massive lines out of this. I'm at 100% on my brush. Where that other body comes in the back, we're just going to have to go ahead and put our other color over it. We're going to paint over this too, and I'll show you how I do that. Even though we're going to put a new sky in there eventually, I want to work clean. If that makes any sense. I want to work with this. I want the image to always look as good as it possibly can while we're going. So we'll come up and fix that later. What I want to do is get these legs on this body perfectly, or as close to perfect as we can.
Hey Jake, I have a question for you. It's a little bit unrelated, but I was wondering, do you only do natural light shooting? Do you ever use any kind of on-camera lighting?
Never, no. I like to, the type of photography I do, it just requires, especially with movement, that I'm able to get a lot of shots at 6 frames a second fast, okay, because most of my usable poses come in between real poses, if that makes sense. So I might have a client do something, like in this instance, so while she's doing something, shooting at 6 frames a second, it would be very difficult to use any light. And not only that, but I realize this could irritate some people, but it's I don't like the way lighting systems look. I never have. I can always tell when off-camera lighting is used, and some people don't like the way no lighting looks. So it's really just personal taste, but it's just part of my style to use only natural light, to travel light, use as little equipment as possible, and then go ahead and build what I need to build in post. But I also go out with, you have to understand, I go out with a photo in mind, and I'm trying to get that photo. And this is the image I had in mind when I went out. I knew it wasn't possible to get it exactly the way I wanted because, just with all the factors we're working with, natural light, clothing movement, winds, stuff like that, I knew I was going to have to build it. So, yeah, it doesn't mean it's wrong not to use it. I just don't, or to use it. I just don't prefer it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously your images are incredibly awesome, so you don't need it.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean I won't someday. It's just right now I'm all about going out there and getting the things that I need, and so that I can build it in post. Okay, this is kind of a tricky area right here. I'm just going to paint over this to get this leg to come in, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. I want to get this little notch right here on the end of that. Also make sure that the end of this leg is sharp, how it came in. And I really want to double check that I got everything on this leg here. So we're going to come through and take all that off. We want to make sure we have a natural leg exposure underneath. And I'm just going to come back on this line. I'm going to use white to make sure we've masked that in all the way. This is kind of a judgment call as to where you want to put, the end of the dress on this. And then we'll fix this with just plain old paint. A lot of the splotchiness up here we'll fix with just plain old paint too. But I think this looks pretty good for now. The shadows are kind of matching up. I don't think it's going to be enough to be able to tell. I want to get that line in there a little bit better. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom out. Okay. Do you see where this is going? I think that looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
Despite all of, despite all the things on the side, but now we have, we have a little bit of hair movement up here. The body, the torso looks like it matches the legs fairly well. Some of this is kind of questionable, but if you didn't know how it was built, you probably wouldn't question it. The next thing I want to do is blend all the sky in better, okay? I'm going to do that with the transparent layer, okay? That's this button right down here. We put a transparent layer over the top, and we're going to go to our paint palette with our brush. I'm going to go ahead and grab this blue color over here, okay? And I'm going to select okay, and I want to grab a color that's as close to the area we're trying to paint over as possible. And I'm just going to start to paint, and you can see some of that go away or start to blend into the sky, okay? Also, there's some noise in this background, whereas in the paint there won't be any noise. Now, if we're going to keep this, there's a way to introduce noise in there so that that actually blends. That's not a need here because we're going to replace the sky anyway. And so I just want to come in here and get these edges nice and clean with our paint. I want a nice gradient coming up in here. And so if I have to work, I'm going to work. Another thing is where this starts to blend or this looks splotchy up here, we could do something else. We can start to blend the two together so they come together. I'm going to do another transparent layer, and now I'm going to grab our gray here that we're trying to paint over. Okay, but what I'm going to do is bring the two together on a different layer, and now we're going to paint that gray over here, and you'll see them all kind of start to come together.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, see, and we're getting smoother. So once we introduce those two colors, now this all looks fairly smooth. We've got some lines up here I have to get rid of. And I'm going to come up here and actually go back to our original palette, sample some color close, and just come in and paint this out where it looks kind of splotchy. I don't want to get too close to the hands. There's really no need. And then I'm going to come back up here, grab my gray again, and start to introduce that and just start to blend this all in pretty nicely. And you can see that kind of go away. There's still a little bit, but we're going to start working on this other side now. Okay. The other thing is, it looks like I got a little overspray on my finger here. We can come back up and just mask out that gray where we painted. Grab a black and just paint it off the fingers. We want to make sure the fingers are nice and sharp and that we don't lose any detail in that from overspray. So that's just something you really have to be careful of. Okay, so let's go work on our other side. This is okay for me right now. We could even come in with a clone brush if we wanted to get really weird about this, but I don't need to because I know I'm going to replace that sky. I'm going to go ahead and flatten my image at this point because I like the way this all went in. I'm going to grab another trend.
Hey,
I'm
Jake,
sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just wondering, so if you're replacing the sky anyway, why do you, what is it? Why do you need to do it?
I'll go over that with you, but what we're going to do is not really completely replace the sky. In order to keep natural edges, we're going to have to introduce some of the real exposure and blend it with a new exposure. So when we're blending, okay, we are going to need some of this blue color that's in here. So I want it to be as smooth as possible so it doesn't show any mistakes, and I'll show you when I'm doing that. And there's a chance we won't need it, but I don't want to get all the work into this image and then have to come in and go, geez, I wish I would have done that right. You know, it's better off to just do it. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and grab my gray. We're going to blend this side in together just like we did before. I'm going to grab my blue again, and we're just going to start to pull it all together. And where you're really going to see the most blotchiness typically is when you back out. You can kind of see it in here. But I don't think that's going to be an issue. I'll show you another thing we can do to fix this. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I have that masked off those fingers because I think I see just a little bit overspray. You can see that come in from blending the sky. Okay, I'm going to flatten this now, and I flatten a lot. Everybody tells me not to, but I do. It's just a masochistic way of teaching myself not to make mistakes. I'm going to duplicate this layer, and I am going to grab a clone stamp tool, okay? And I'm going to sample this side over here. We're just going to come in and even some of this blotchiness out with that, just a little bit. And again, yes, we're going to replace this. It's not a real big deal, but I do want it to look as smooth as possible coming in as we replace the sky. Some of that I don't really like. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Is this a high school senior girl?
No, she was only an 8th grader, but her mom brought her up for photos. And she was really great, really natural. And when we get to do that, there's really not any pressure, right? Because we don't have to do anything for yearbook or anything like that. We get to have fun and do artsy things. And so that's what we did. But we did a nice balance of close-ups. And I think what we'll do is, just for everybody, is edit this album. Okay, so we'll probably stick to this album just so everybody can get an idea of how I do this, or maybe present an album. Maybe 3 or 4 images, I'm not sure, but really it was a great shoot. So from here, Dana, I'm going to start to select the sky. I'm going to look through some things. There are some things I'm not crazy about, like some of the reflection in this water. But this isn't really about the reflection. This is more about the water movement we have down here. We have really great detail coming out, and it really does just kind of looks like she's floating out of the water. You know what I mean?
Yes. And
it's that kind of ethereal scene I was after. So something more artsy. This isn't something I would typically probably spend this much time on a client image, but at the same time, I'm not going to waste this because I have the opportunity to build it. So the only thing I did there was I want to make sure I have a nice clean line of her coming straight down. We could even get in this and just decide I want to replace this reflection completely. But again, I don't think it's about the reflection. I think it's about her coming out of the water. And the closer we can crop this in, the more people are going to be able to tell that she's coming out of the water, okay? One thing I'm going to do is come in here and grab my little patch tool, or my little Band-Aid tool up here, upper left-hand corner, and I'm just going to get that stick out. That stick was kind of annoying. And I'm going to go ahead and save this in the Lightroom, and I'm going to look at a sky for this. I'm going to go over how I pick a sky and what kind of sky is going to work for this. I don't want anything too dramatic. Sometimes I'll take something like this with some light behind it, or with some obvious direct light from a sunset, which was coming back from behind me to my left, and put a sunset in behind it. Doesn't match, but it's okay. It's going back to lighting. If I was using off-camera lighting and trying to get the sunset, she would obviously be lit from the front. So reality isn't a concern. But I don't think we have anything. I don't think we have anything here that's. I don't want anything that dramatic. I'm just going to look for a kind of a pretty sky to go back here, almost like this is happening in sunset. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we're going to go ahead and look for something like that. I actually captured some great sunsets on the way home, but from that shoot that night. From the car, you can see them there, but I'm not going to use any of those. I'm just going to. Yeah. Go ahead.
I have one other question. So I'm just curious about when you were composing that photograph. Were you crouched down really low, or how far down were you shooting?
Good question. So when I shoot all those, I'm physically laying in water. I'm shooting from water level up, okay? And that's what gives it that neat perspective. So I'm shooting straight up at the client. I have them walk out directly in front of me, okay? And when I'm out here, some of these lines are pretty important if I'm up high, okay? So I have her stay between these two lines that kind of come in. In this one, because I was so low, it's not really important. Does that make any sense or help?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I'm physically laying down, my shoulders in the water, my camera's out, and I'm shooting up. So, you know, it's not a pleasant thing to get, but it certainly is worth it. You know, another thing I'm not crazy about this image is something we're going to fix is I can see my water line coming across this way and my skyline almost coming across this way. It would be more comfortable for me if this water line was completely matched up to the skyline. So one thing I'm going to do really quick, I'd like to have them perfectly parallel and still have her straight up and down. I'm just going to go look. I'm going to go to liquify, okay? And I'm going to come down and I'm going to press this a little bit, see if we can't get some of this kind of manipulated and straightened out a little bit. I know that's such a little tiny thing, but I just think that's kind of an important detail. I would like to have my water line straight across. I'm even going to come over here and move this side up just a little bit. We don't want it too warped, and I do want it to look nice and straight. But this is better for me right here, probably.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, just another way to think outside the box. And next time, you can just come in here with your liquefy tool and kind of straighten things up. So I'm going to go ahead and take that. And now our water level's down. You saw it come when I did that. Saw it come down and out straight across, because we're going to take a detail brush over the top of this water line, and we're going to bring out that focus plane later on. Okay, for now I'm going to come in and I'm going to grab some blurred sunsets. I don't want a sun behind her, but what I do is some people go out and shoot sunsets. I actually shoot the clouds behind the sunset, because I know I'm going to need them in some of my images, and sometimes if you turn around and look behind the sunset, the clouds are just as amazing as they are in front of you. So I'm going to come through here, and I'd like to find something to bring out the pink in her clothing, but I don't want to go too over the top. I'm going to pull in a few different options and look. This is one option. And I've used these skies so many times that, you know, I just kind of know what I'm after before I come in. This one would be really pretty. I'm going to go ahead and pull these two in, and we're going to look. I think this one would probably blend in really well to the sky that we already have, meaning the color, just because we just want to show a little bit of sky detail and something dramatic, right? I'm going to go ahead and up my exposure on this, and this is already blurred in camera. This also has a little hue of pink in it that would match her dress. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up in Photoshop and see if we can't introduce this into it. I'm going to do the same way I always transpose my skies. I'm going to go to Image, Canvas Size, okay? And I'm just going to make it bigger. The numbers don't matter. Okay, what I do is I just want some room to work with. I'm going to close this image out, the torso image. I'm also going to save this into Photoshop so we don't lose it. Or save it into Lightroom, I'm sorry. Okay, that image is saved. I'm going to go ahead and flatten it just to reduce my file size. Okay, and I'm going to grab my move tool and pull it into our sky, and we're going to start to see what we have. And from here, I'm going to start painting with some black, and I'm going to see how it matches into the scene. We're going to begin to blend the two. And you asked why this was important before, and you're about to see why, because as we blend, I don't want a very thin line coming down through some of this, but it won't be that noticeable. So I'm going to start with the lower opacity and just start to look and see if I even like the sky detail in relation to the scene. So we're going to come in and start to see some of that sky detail come in through the back. I'm going to up my opacity a little bit more, okay? And I do like it. I think in the back it might be missing some contrast. So I'm going to come down here because see how this all looks kind of flat? That's because we have that other layer over it. And we have to have that other layer over it in order to bring in natural edges and things like that. I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, Brightness, Contrast. We have to have it in there the way I work. I don't use selections or anything like that. And so you can see me go ahead, and now you can see the contrast come out in the back. And now I'm going to go ahead and up the brightness. And we're going to take another layer of black over that just to bring out a little bit more. I'm going to go down lower. Let's try this. Okay. And it's starting to come in pretty well now. And I think this color is going to work well with this background. What's going to take a while, it's going to be kind of time consuming, is literally removing this mask from her to get her in there. But it's going to give me an idea of how it's going to play out in the scene. So I'm going to go to my white brush, 100%, and we're just going to get the meat of this in here, okay? So the basic part with the light on it, and I'm going to back out here in a second and just see if I like the way it looks in relation to the image. Okay, as far as the sky matches up with colors and like that, I can even make some mistakes here, but I want to get as much of this in as possible. And if I like it, we're going to come in, maybe blend in a little more sky or try a darken layer to bring her in. Blonde hair is super tricky. But, you know, I'll tell you what, if she would have had really fine hair, this wouldn't have worked out. But she didn't, because it would have just been all over the place and super hard. But when they pulled up, I thought, oh gosh, we can do all kinds of cool stuff with this neat hair because it's gonna stay together. You know, because that stuff, you know, it depends on what you're going to get. And plus, it was a windy day to boot, so I was a little worried about it. Let's back it out and look at her in relation to this color. I think this could be very pretty.
Oh, yeah.
You can kind of start to see it come together. And then once we're able to introduce some of that reflection into the water in the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to work on this, okay?
Uh-huh.
We're going to try to get all this in, and I'm going to show you how I get things in. I'm just going to grab a brush, get really close to the edge here. Some of this might come in with a darkened layer. I think this could be a pretty good stock image potentially, so I am going to take the extra time on it. And I'm just going to come around my edges carefully with a Wacom tablet. I'm going to zoom out, come in and look a lot too. Also, you know, we got to make sure we have all this painted in. You know, people always ask me why don't you use selections too, but really I've never found a selection I like that, and I've really messed with it a lot, that works better than just a hand-painted brush.
Uh-huh.
Okay, because we can get our edge exactly how we want it in all the places we want it. So also makes you really good at drawing and painting too. It's kind of a learned skill, and so you'll get better at it. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say I've always done the same thing. It almost feels kind of therapeutic.
Yeah, it really does. It's kind of, yeah. Can be therapeutic until you make quite a few mistakes. And
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
That's the nice thing about now, so you can always go back and fix it.
Right. So I'm just coming in here and getting it. I want to show you the brush I'm using too. I always use the same brush. So from Photoshop default, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over. Okay, at 100% opacity. Softness set to maximum. And then, you know, the smaller you make your brush, the harder the edge is going to be, if that makes any sense. If we were to go up bigger, it would take up, you know, it would fan out a little more. It would feather out quite a bit more.
Right.
So I'm going to come and get some more of the meat of this. I'll put it in here. You know, and once we get her in here, we can work on some things too, as far as like skin smoothing or just removing little flaws or anything like that. But for right now, we just want to get her in here. We want to get her in the scene. We want to get her in there clean. I can see where this isn't super great. I'm going to come in and work on the edge. Whoops. When you see some of that color come out there on the end from the original sky, you want to back up, okay? And this is a hard edge to see. Now, I could see the edge a little easier if I were able to come in and blend some more of that original sky in, but I don't want to right now because I think we need this contrast. That original sky is a little bit gray. So I'm just going to take my time and do it right. I was kind of probing for where the real edge was there. And then if I made a mistake, I would just go up and hit my back button. I'm sorry?
I was just going to say, you're making me want to get a tablet because I have to do all this stuff with a mom.
Well, that's brutal. But I'll tell you what, really, you know, once you get past, it's really hard to get used to a tablet. But once you get past it, you wonder how you lived without it. So you just have to be able to go through the process of learning to use it. And when I got mine, I learned to use, you know, I did it for everything. Surfing the internet, whatever I did on my computer. And that's one way you can learn really fast. And, you know, to use it for anything on the computer aside from typing.
Yeah.
So use it in your daily tasks, and you'll learn pretty quick. But again, it's an acquired skill. But once you have that skill, it's really incredible. So I'm going to come down here, start to put this edge in. This is actually going in pretty easy. I thought I was going to be tough depending on the sky I chose. But I have just the right blend of coming over that with a lower opacity brush so that I could see, I can see my edge good enough, right? Yeah. So this is starting to look pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it looks great.
This hair could be an issue, but I think the hair up there on the edges is a lot darker. So we're going to come in a second here and try to get that through with the darkened layer. I'm really more interested in the legs right now. But I can see that hair is all a lot darker there.
Mhm.
And I think we're going to be fine. She's got some kind of little hair thingy in there. But yeah, I think this is going to be good. Right there, I started to hit natural sky, but we'll come in and take a look at that. And if we have to, we'll start to blend in some more of our original scene to get that in. But for now, I'm going to come down here and work on dress and legs and get all this done. Have you tried any composites like this?
Have I tried what?
Have you tried any composites like this?
You know, I've used some sky overlays. I've, you know, I'm not very practiced at it, but
right.
One of the first times I used one, you know, it looked good until someone pointed out to me that it wasn't. It should have been more blurry in the background, which is like, oh yeah, you're right. You know.
But that comes from looking. I look at some of my first work, you know, 2, 3, 4 years ago, and it just didn't see it, and it starts to come to you. You start to notice things like that, and so even though it might seem like something that was bad to you, that's a valuable mistake, and so you get better at it. Never perfect, but better. But when I'm going out, I'm knowing this is possible in my head in the computer, right? So I'm seeing her there, and she's not knowing as a client, she's not knowing I'm thinking, oh, wow, I want to show her ascending from the water. So I kind of say, you know, leave your dignity in the car, do what I tell you to, jump up and down in the water, and I'm going to try to make you something really cool out of this. And, you know, I think this is going to work out. I think it's going to be kind of neat, and I don't think it's going to be something they could have got anywhere else, but it really just goes back to thinking outside of the box again. So, you know, just being able to add that little extra thing, knowing that you can do this in the computer if you need to, and use your own pictures and exposures to do it. People ask my pictures are real.
So let me ask you this question. So when you were starting out and you had ideas like this, was it harder to get people to kind of go along with them, or did you just say trust me?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really, because I mean, I didn't really. How do I want to explain it? This wasn't really for the client, so I didn't think they would ever see it. But sometimes I show them pictures in the camera, and I explained to her kind of after the fact what I was going to do, right? And then she understood it. So this year, I really started showing clients a lot of images in camera, and then explaining to them what I can do with them and what my capabilities are. And for a lot of people, that's still hard to comprehend. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It seems so easy for me because I do it all day, and I just talk to them like, oh, it's just going to work out that way. And they're like, how is that even possible? Well, it just is, so I kind of explain how it works real quick. And, yeah, they go along with it. And, you know, if they don't go along with it, the client might not be for you. And so that's part of your style. We're getting really close here, so.
No, I really appreciate how meticulous you are.
Well, no problem, yeah, but it's, you know, again, though it goes back to therapeutic, it's really OCD. I'm not trying to be helpful, I'm trying to quell my sickness. So I'm dealing with my problems very carefully. So, yeah, this is looking pretty cool. But I mean, aside from that, and seriously, it's really about the result. I think the result's going to be really cool.
Absolutely.
So I'm getting to the point here where I can start to blend in that skyline, and that's going to come across on these legs, and that's going to all come in with original, real edge. And so by introducing that, you know, almost like as a hybrid of the two images, it's really going to make it look lifelike.
Wow. That's cool.
So I'm going to come through here. I'm going to start to get this in. I'm just going to go over my skyline in the back, okay? And we can come in and put some of the more of that in with the darken layer. What I want to get in is the rest of the edge of this and that other arm. So that's what I'm going to do. We're going to come in here. You know, and also they asked me which color dress to wear. She had white, she had black, and she had this pink. And I just thought this pink would be a nice contrast as far as reflection in the water. Sometimes black. If we would have had a black dress here, it would have been a lot easier to put the edge in. But I don't think it would. I don't think it would have had the pop in the image because I'm knowing that I also have some of this color available in my skies, right?
Yeah.
So, and again with the client, you can always do it in both. On this one, I just kind of from experience, I knew it would work. Well, I didn't know 100%, but I thought the chances were pretty good. So I didn't have her go ahead and do it in black too because we had other things to do. It really wasn't a lot of work to get this image. It's a lot of work to build it. But if you know what you're doing and you're shooting on the same focus plane, it's pretty easy. And this is easy. It's labor intensive, but it's easy, and you can end up with something really amazing. And for me, if I'm paying money to a client, let's see if I'm paying somebody to give me something, I'm just one of those people where if I got one really amazing thing, I would be happy, right? Instead of just 15 crappy things. So you could do like one amazing thing and still, give them 12 crappy things and still be able to offer value. I mean, most people won't do that, and I don't do that. But all I'm trying to say is taking this much time on an image could be worth it for some people. It just depends.
Yeah. So would you say that are most of your images composites or not?
Well,
is that
you have to, a composite, almost most of them, but I also do some out of camera, like great close-ups and stuff like that at 1.2 that have no blending, right? For me, when I started doing this, you have to understand, in Nebraska, there's just not a lot. The only thing we really have are amazing skies, okay? And I had to be able to show that in my pictures because I thought it would be a shame to be outdoors and not be able to see what amazing, skies Nebraska has. So how can I introduce that to a client? And not only introduce it to a client and the people who are looking at the photos, but how can I do it consistently? Because we don't have great skies every night. So how can I offer consistently great skies to a client? And that's how I came up with it. So some nights clients did have great skies. We could use that exposure from the same night to blend into the scene. And other nights like this they were just gray, but they're still going to want a cool sky. You don't want to base your whole clientele on the weather. You want to be able to offer some kind of consistency, and so that's how I worked around it. And so I've learned to shoot even from certain directions, certain angles, so that clients still can get a good sky, even if they came on a night where it just wasn't a great sky, and that way everybody ends up with good photos.
Yeah.
Now, it's also a lot more work, but that's my problem. It's not the client's problem.
Yeah.
And I enjoy doing the work. The only thing, the only time I don't enjoy is when somebody's breathing down my neck and then with their stuff. So. And I understand. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think I may have asked you this before, but I'm going to ask again. So, are most of your clients, like families and individuals, that kind of thing?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they all are families or individuals. Individuals meaning, like a senior portrait. My senior portraits are different, but even though they're different, we also put some images in there that aren't different because, people are going to want that. So I made a bad mistake here with some of the sky. I have to go back in and redo a lot of this because I didn't notice that at first. This is going to be the tricky end for me, and this is going to be where we have to start introducing some of our original sky. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that right now just so we can see some more edge. I'm going to start out with a really low opacity, let's say about 7%, white brush, come back over the top. And we just want a good balance so that we can start to see more original edge come in. Now you'll see this brighten and you'll see the contrast go away at the background, but I have other ways of accentuating that, and now we can see a more definite edge. Do you see?
Okay, yeah.
And now I have a better guide, and so we want to be able to see where we're going and have some of that original edge in, because that original edge is what's going to pull off some of the reality. And you wouldn't want to take this much time just putting somebody's a different body on just because you don't like the body. If you're out there, you have to tell the client, stay there, we didn't get it. You know, in this case, it's not possible. I can't say keep jumping until your clothes look perfect. So that's why we have to come in here. That's why I have to come in here and do this. But I knew I was going to have to do this. So I wanted to make sure we got the poses that were correct to be able to add a torso onto the legs. And again, this is going to be some tricky stuff up in here. Hopefully some of this hair will come in with a darkened layer. But this is pretty intricate.
Yeah, I was wondering how you were going to do that.
Well, I do it trial and error. So I'm hoping some of this darker stuff in here is going to come in with a darkened layer, and it very well could. This is a mistake here. I can see some of that come through. I mean, I'm going to try a lower opacity and just dab over that with black and try to get some of that original sky, or some of that behind sky back in. And that looks fine because it's so far out. Okay? But I think a darkened layer is going to come in and take care of most of this. What I really want to get are the highlights or things I know that aren't going to go in over my darkened layer. So I'm going to come up here. We're going to zoom in and again just start taking some more time. Whoops. Got to go back to 100% white and just start taking this in here. Some of that might not have worked. No, yeah, I went over. It's so important. Of all the photos that people send me, the one thing that I realized right off the bat is haloing. Where that haloing comes from, probably, is frustration from using a mouse. Okay, and people go, "Geez, I just can't do it with a mouse." So, but I can do it because I'm physically drawing on a Wacom tablet right now, and so it's easy for me. Just using a drawing motion instead of a mouse motion.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, I'm going to come up here and start to try to get this in. I'm going to explore this edge a little bit better too. And kind of zoom out and get really precise. The darker edges like this are pretty easy to get in on this end, the shadow end. So we're getting really close, but I think the outcome of this image is going to be pretty darn cool.
Oh yeah, I love the colors in it.
Yeah, and I think once we're able to, you know, mess with some of the colors when we're done, I think it'll really tie it all together. Part of the trick of a composite is okay, so you put two images together, but then once you put an effect over those two images that affects them both the same, it starts to make it all one image, or at least appear that way. So it's, you know, it's part illusion.
Yeah.
So once we get the little details on these fingers in here, I kind of messed up there. I'm going to step back a little bit and see if we can't get some of that sky out. Where did that come in? Boy, it must have come in from here. I'm not ready to show you how to fix that yet, but there is a way. Okay, so I should have been in closer on the hand here. So I'm just going to come in real fast and get all this. Yeah, we've got to make sure there is no haloing over the sky. Although we can come in and fix it, you know, like I did with the other one, and then introduce some noise into it and really make it so that if you come up really close, you're not going to notice. Most people aren't going to come up really close, so
yeah.
This could pitch a fit here. Let's see if I can get that nail in right. So these little tiny details on the fingers are really what's going to kind of sell it. So we got to be super careful. I'm just going to put an outline on that one. Come up in here.
You know, talking about the details, that's actually something I learned from one of our previous times. You know, I had never been really paying attention to like hands and lips and just kind of the details. I started paying a lot more attention to making sure that they were sharp.
Yeah, and you do want to make sure they're sharp. But what I want to make sure is sharp here really is the edge, so not typically the focus. Because, you know, even at 1-2, the chances of them having them on the same focus plane as on the eyes at 1-2 is very slim. But we can take a detail brush and kind of bring that sharpness out or sharpen. But I think once we back out, I don't know if I'm adjusting, or, you know, addressing what you said properly, but I think I am. it's really small details on everything. So even if it's a detail you don't think is going to matter, it's the collective sum of all those details that come together to make a great image. And so let's back out and look at this and see how amazing that looks now.
Yeah.
It's really valuable, just that little bit of time we spent on that. And as we start to get this other one in, which is going to be a little easier because we have a darker edge, it's going to look pretty cool.
Yeah, I can already tell.
We have to treat this just like I've treated my images in the other videos. So we're going to make the image we wish we would have had out of camera, okay? Yeah. And then we're going to come in and accentuate the things we like, and we're going to minimalize the things we don't. So right now we're still trying to get the image we wish we would have had out of camera.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, the benefit of this to me, aside from the client having something really cool, is this image could be possibly fairly viral. And so I knew that. And so how does that pay off for me? Well, it brings, you know, more people to my Facebook page, more people to 500px, possible stock image. There's all kinds of good things that could come from this. Now, addressing that again, though, just because I like it doesn't mean everybody else will. Because a lot of times I'll post something that I put a lot of work into, and geez, nobody likes it. But what I've gotten out of that is learning. Okay. So I don't necessarily know what I learned, but I'm getting better at figuring out what people like and don't like. And before I post something, you know, there's a kind of this gut reaction. You can look at an image and go, this is it, wow. You know, and sometimes you're like, well, maybe I can pull this off, let's see, and get ready to delete it. That sense gets stronger over time. And that comes from making mistakes. It comes from all kinds of things. And you can kind of tell when you're in the middle of the image, you really have to get to a point where you have to force yourself and say, okay, this isn't going to work, and I need to fix it. Otherwise, it's not going to be the image I want it to be. So a lot of it's also discipline, coming in and saying, I've got to fix this now. I know it's not right. I'm just going to take the time to do it. Mm-hmm. And so that's important too. So psychologically, as you're working on an image, I'm trying to explain some things that could go through your head, but take the time to make it right. Another thing that does is if you take a lot of time on an image, it'll teach you to get it right out of camera, if it was possible, because you go, gosh, it was going to take me an hour to fix that. Let's get it right now. And some people don't want to make the client uncomfortable. They don't want to admit to screwing up or doing something. And I say, listen, we didn't get it. My settings were on. I'm rotten at this. Whatever it takes, you have to tell them in that way to go back and get it, you know. Because a lot of people, they just don't want to look stupid. I don't care how I look. I just care about the result. So if they walk away thinking I'm an idiot, that's fine with me because I know I can deliver on the result. Yeah. So I get forceful sometimes, meaning we didn't get it. I'm going to tell you this is important to me, you know, from the standpoint of a result. So get the kids back out of the car, get them in here. We have this opportunity. We have to grab it. This looks cool. So my battles this year have been with that. They've been with, you know, knowing that I didn't get something, but trying to tell the client that we did. I don't do that anymore. I say, hey, we don't have this. I don't want them to have any false expectations. And I say, I wanted this, but we didn't get it, okay? And then just being direct with them. We didn't get it because your kids didn't cooperate, or we didn't get it because the chemistry's not there, right? Maybe the kids don't like me. But you're trying to figure out what that is, because there's really way more to a shoot than just coming up with a great image. That you've got to be able to talk to people to get it. Yeah. Absolutely. So that's kind of one of my struggles this year. Well, dignity, ego. but well, I will tell you, because of that though, Dana, I've gotten better images out of camera, right? And I've also got clients, you know, they have a better feel for what they're getting, where before it was kind of like, I'll make this work. You know, I'll talk to you in 6 weeks. This way they kind of know what they're getting to. So anyway. Well, I would think that. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I would think that because you've kind of you've established this body of work now that people
Mm-hmm.
might have trust from your clients now, they have a little bit more
Yeah.
idea of your.
Sure, but I want them to be involved in the process and comfortable too. You know what I mean? I want them to be involved in the process and comfortable because, again, that equates to good images.
Yeah.
Everything that I do revolves around one thing, and even in my personal life, better images, right? So I'm super hard on myself, and sometimes I'll put all this work into something, and this could be one of those examples right here, where I just say, "This is it. This is going to be my masterpiece," and it's not. Nobody likes it, and I put all this time and effort into it. But what did I get out of it, though? I did get what you're talking about, that therapy, that that feeling where time just kind of disappears, and so that's why you do it. You do it for that, and you do it for the result too. But doing it for that first reason that I just talked about is going to get you the result, right? So doing it for the love, people see passion in the work. People buy passion. They buy it over results, really. I mean, I think my clients can tell when we go out that I genuinely like being there. Kind of funny for me when people say, "What's your time limit?" Well, if we're getting amazing things, there's no time limit. In fact, what's your time limit? Because if we're getting great things, I'm not going to let you go. It's not about 2 hours or 3 hours or outfit changes. It's about coming home with the best thing I could possibly get. And it's been like that. And when it's not like that anymore, it's probably time to move on.
Yeah. I like I'm actually starting to learn a little bit more about getting shots with movement, instead of having people standing there posing,
Yeah, well, it's important for virility, meaning we want people to push buttons when they see our work, because when people push buttons, it pays us. And there's ways, that's a whole nother session, but when people push buttons, it brings people to our page and makes people look, especially on a social media platform, and people respond to movement. They respond to interaction. Mine, they're responding to interaction with the environment, or it could be a toy, it could be something else like that. And that's just something I found. I don't know if there's anything else that works for anybody else. I mean, half-naked women, of course, right? But that's kind of a cheat.
Yeah.
I've always found that people like people doing things better than just looking at the camera. They want to see people doing things and interacting with something, and it'll make people stop, look, and think. It doesn't have to tell a story, because no matter what the story is, people are going to have different perception of it. So they'll make up their own story in their head.
Yeah.
But it has to give the appearance of a story. And so people like stories. So I try to show stories. I want my images more narrative. I want it about doing something and, being part of the environment. It also shows the client involvement in the shoot, which is pretty darn cool. Clients have a lot more fun, I can tell you that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And fun photographs well. It really does. So this is coming in pretty cool, man. Woman.
Oh, yeah.
Lady. So I am gonna try to grab a darken layer just to see if we can't get a few more of those stray hairs in. Pretty cool. Another thing I did, Dana, was, you probably didn't see me, I cropped this down just because I want to work with a smaller file size. It'll speed Photoshop up. I am going to go ahead and crop this close to where I want it for right now, and let's go ahead and look at this image. It's pretty cool. The one thing we're really going to try to show, though, accentuate, is going to be that movement from where her feet are actually leaving the water. Okay, and I might stretch out a little bit of this top. In fact, let's come back from that crop. I'm going to step back a little bit. I wish we had a little more room at the top of this image to work with, and we can do that simply by coming here to our top layer, grabbing a select tool. Okay, I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, Scale, and I'm just going to pull that color grid up a little bit to the top, and now we have some more room to crop.
Nice.
Seeing how that blended in really well?
Yeah.
So let's come down here. crop, crop. Now she's not. Now it doesn't look like she's jumping off the screen. We've got more room to work with. And one thing we have to do is get the skyline in and stray hairs. And I'm going to do that with a darken layer here. I'm going to show somebody something I have. I'm going to show you something I don't think I showed in my previous videos. I'm going to duplicate this layer. Go to Image, Adjustments, and Replace Color. I want to grab this gray color, okay, and I want to take it out. That way when we go to put our darken layer in, it's not going to show. So as I move up lightness, what we're left with here, and I'm going to up my fuzziness to grab more of that gray color, what we're left with here is just the dark edges, okay? And now as a darken layer, we can go ahead and use these dark edges to go over and not have it affect any of our sky. Did that make sense?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I've never seen that before.
Yeah, I didn't purposely leave it out of my videos, but it's something I had to practice with, okay, and use. And I want to show you now that we have this darken layer, how much easier this goes in. It's really just going to put the darker tones in. So we're going to go to darken, and now let's come up here. We can see it didn't quite do a great job on the skyline, but we can fix that by going in and darkening the image. But let's look at the hair, because that's what I'm the most concerned with now. We can see some of this come in. I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, Brightness, and I'm going to lower the brightness on this layer. As we do that, we can see some of these darker edges start to come in, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK on this. I'm going to mask, and I'm going to Command I. Now I'm just going to take my white brush at 100%. I'm going to go around the edges of this hair, and you can see some of that start to come in a little bit better.
Oh, yeah. That's cool.
Okay, so that helped on our black. This is a little hard up here on this edge. I'm going to go ahead and get a lower opacity brush and just blend it out some. And now let's come paint across our skyline. I'm going to go ahead and grab my white brush again, and I'm just going to come across the skyline, and we can see this start to come in here. Okay?
Yeah.
Pretty cool. We want to stay away from skin on this, so I am going to get between your legs there on the ankles with that brush, and I'm going to come down, and now I'm going to grab black, okay, and I'm going to remove all that darken from the ankles so it doesn't look like we have a stripe coming through. I don't really see that had a huge effect on any of this, but just in case, I want to take it off. We're getting very close to having the image we wish we would have had on a camera. I am going to come through here and start to look for little tiny mistakes that could come out later. And we're going to be able to blend this cloud detail in the sky in super easy. I'm going to go ahead and flatten. I'm going to save this in Photoshop because I would really start crying if I lost this from all the work and just detailed work that went into it. And let's just zoom up and look at our edge. I mean, I can see some places that aren't perfect here, but far out, it's really not going to make a difference. And you can see, does it make sense now why I went ahead and smoothed out that sky that we used before?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay, good. I see a little spot up here, probably water on my sensor. I'm going to go ahead and blot that out. And now we're just going to come through and start to remove little imperfections in the skin, stuff like that. I'm just going to look for blemishes.
What lens were you using on that?
85-1.2, it's all I use. It's all I've been using. I was going to go up to 200 2.0 this year, and I thought, you know, I can only get better with this. And one of my students flew out here from mentees. She flew out here from New Hampshire, and she brought that lens, the 200 2.0, and I used it, and I thought, my God, what a beast. I would have the hardest time chasing around kids with that. You know what I mean? Even though I love the way it looked, but my images are so dependent on movement that I really need the mobility. So, and you know, and part of I'm just lazy. So part of that, maybe I need to get used to it, or again, it's something that I need to try. This is kind of a weird looking edge right here, and I'm not sure where that came from. I'm going to go ahead and grab I'm just going to try to blend some of this out.
No, I have an 85. I really like it.
I think it's an amazing lens, and you only get better with it. You know, people complain that it's hard to use. It is, but when people see you getting something good out of an 85-1.2, I think they respect the skill. At least I hope they do, because it really has taken me a long time to learn to focus with this lens. Okay, so The next thing is I don't like the way my skyline looks in the back. I'm just going to fix that with a quick blur layer. Anybody can go ahead and use filter Gaussian blur, okay, for that. I'm going to use alien skin bokeh too, just because I think it's a more natural blur. Okay. And I already have it set to where I want it, right there at about number 6. And I don't even know if you can buy this program standalone anymore, but I know it's part of Exposure 7, but I'm a creature of habit. I'm going to go ahead and use it here. And I'm just going to, now I have that blur, okay, I've masked it off. I'm going to take my white brush and paint it on where I want it, which is right over that skyline. And now you can see a little bit of halo start to go away from that skyline. Did you see that disappear?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. We are getting really close here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my other sky. I'm going to save this again. I'm going to grab the sky that we used to put in up here. I'm going to start to introduce that reflection into the water.
Yeah, I was wondering how you were going to do that.
Photo, edit in, open this. I open this as a smart object because sometimes Photoshop won't let me open two of the same images. I don't know if that's something I just haven't figured out, probably. But anyway, it lets me open it as a smart object the second time. This is super simple. I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, Flip Vertical, okay? Image, canvas size, bigger canvas size. We're working with a blur here, so we don't have to be as detail-oriented as we did around these little details up top, okay? So from here, I'm going to grab my flattened image, go ahead and put it up here. I want to be kind of close as to where, you know, some of this was. The best part is I'm going to get rid of this kind of ugly gray out of here. The secret to reflection is, first of all, I'm going to come take this out at about 59%, okay? And we're going to start below the focus plane right there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to back out. I want to be able to see some of that reflection because her reflection we have to come put back in. I'm going to go to white, and I'm going to follow the lines in this and see where our mistakes are. I'm just going to use this as kind of a guide. I'm going to come up along the legs up here. The secret is using brush strokes, okay? Don't go around dab and paint here and paint there because it won't work out right. We have to keep it linear when it's like this anyway.
Okay.
So I am going to introduce a little more of the native foreground. So I'm going to come back in with lighter. Just so I think we'll get probably a better edge on our reflection. Can I come back up to 100%? Make sure we got this little part in. I'm just looking for little mistakes in the reflection here. And now the next thing I have to do is come back in here to my sky because it's dark compared to the rest of the scene. I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, Brightness, Contrast. And I'm going to go ahead and start to brighten that sky and the reflection until it starts to match our scene. And I'm going to go ahead and hit OK there. And we're going to start to look at this. So kind of starting to work. I think I'm going to put some more of our original in by coming across that skyline there. And, you know, this is just kind of trial and error.
Yeah.
You just got to sit there and paint till you get it to where you want it. I'm going to come back up here and put some of this in and then come back in. What's really important is that we maintain our focus plane because we're going to bring some detail out on that. We want to show shallow depth of field. We want to show the impossible shot, right? That's the trick here. So from this, I'm fairly happy with this. I'm going to zoom out and look at it as far as the scene and make sure we don't, you know, nothing's too dark or weird looking. But really, we've just built this composite. We're just getting started on it. What we want to do now is we have the image we wish we would have had out of camera or close to it, right?
That's gorgeous.
I'm going to come up here and take 100% too, just to get some of this out. Real soft brush, real soft edge. Make sure we have all of that original skyline in there. And I'm going to put some motion blur on the clouds in the water because with motion blur on her, we should have them on the clouds in the water. And this is all an in Photoshop blur. I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Motion Blur. I'm going to move this over, and you can see our blur going up and down here. It's also going side to side in some of the portions of it. But as we go here, I'm going to set my angle to straight up at a 90-degree angle, okay? And then I just up the distance about 133, and this all snaps in better now. Do you see it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, the other thing I'm going to do is grab some of this blue and introduce it into, let's see here. Right here. Introduce it into this kind of gray. Okay, even though it's going across the focus plane, that's fine. I want to get rid of some of this and start to blend. And now we're going to come up close and look, and I'm going to go to lower it. And now we can see this color start to not be so gray or kind of dingy looking at top, right?
Uh-huh.
And I'm going to mask. Make sure we got it all off the feet and the splash. And through this real thin focus plane, I'm going to remove it too to bring the detail back in from that. Okay. That's kind of a mistake there. I'm going to flatten this a little bit. I'm going to save our image, and we're going to take it in Lightroom and start looking at some exposure, see what happens when we mess with exposure on this, and just see how cool it starts to look, how cool it doesn't start to look. Okay, but I have more control over this in Lightroom. Not necessarily more control, but I have speedier, more efficient control instead of having to open things up. I'm going to go ahead and lower the exposure on this image. And you can see it will start to look pretty cool. It looks like we're missing quite a few blacks. I'm going to up the highlights on it and just look. I'm going to up my exposure, bring it back up. I think what it's missing is contrast. We'll bring more blacks in, up the exposure there again. And now it doesn't look so flat compared to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just got more pop. And again, this is a personal taste thing, so it doesn't mean I'm right. Also, the top of my sky up here looks a little bit blue. I might come in and blend some of that out, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and put it over top of my other image. So now we've grabbed it, and this way I can keep those in where I want it. I'm going to go ahead and flatten it, and I'm going to grab it, take it, pull it into this, and now places in this image that I don't like how blue that sky is, I can start to maybe, I'm going to mask it, take some of that out, the lower opacity brush. I'm going to take 49, and you see that sky starting to lighten up there?
Yeah.
Now, even though I like the way our model looks, now I can come back in with white at 100% and put her back just the way we had her. I liked her better out of camera with the previous exposure that we brought in. So, but I was able to, remove a lot of the portions that were too blue.
Yeah.
And now let's look at it as a whole. Way better. Okay.
Yeah.
Next is I'm going to just pan out here again and start looking for dark spots and stuff like that too, because I don't want any dark spots. Next, we're going to bring out details on the splash. The splash is the most important part of this. It shows her leaving the water, and without that, it just looks like a comp. But this is real. So even people say, is this real or not? Well, yes and no, because they're my pictures and they are real, and I had to get this. I'm going to take this detail brush and take it over the water where it leaves, okay? And I'm going to take it across the focus plane through here. Remember, we straightened that focus plane out before, so I might have to come back in and just fix that a little more. But right here is where we want most of the detail. I kind of don't like the reds and stuff that it brings out of the skin, so I'm going to go ahead and fix that. Now, this also looks kind of HDRA fragmented. You can see the haloing around here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower the opacity on that detail brush, the effect of that detail brush, until that all goes away. And then that's what I'm going to set on. The next thing I'm going to bring out are things you wouldn't typically think you'd want to bring out. I'm going to flatten this. Wrinkles and clothes. Anything that's going to show good focus. I'm going to duplicate, especially this around the edge here of the dress. Whoops. We're going to go ahead and bring that out with the detail brush. Okay, We're going to go through the clothes. It's going to make it look, some of it look really bad. And so what we're going to do is we're going to back that off. And I always stay away from skin and hair with this. Okay, and now from there, looking at it, I'm going to go ahead and lower what I just did, the opacity on what I just did, until it looks real. And then if it looks real up close like that, it's going to look, you know, it's going to look better. Does that look cool?
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and flatten this. And the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to do some skin smoothing on the legs. People have, what do you have? Do you have portraiture?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, you can use that. I'm going to use Nick to smooth the skin here. So I'm going to use Color Effects Pro 4. Get this to open. Ooh, look at that with that film finish over it. It just kind of comes alive. That's our last step, but that's kind of a preview of how it'll look after we take care of some of the I'm going to go to dynamic skin. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Like, Jake, is that one of the? I know last time I talked to you, you said you used it. Is that like one of your finishing touch kind of actions that you use?
Nick is my finishing touch action. It always has been. It's just what I use. That recipe works for almost anything. For some reason, it just comes to life. So I've always used it. I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I don't even know if they know that I use it, but I do use it. And I'll show you that. That's my final step. It's going to be my final step on this. I might take a sponge tool just to bring out some more of the color in some of these clouds here on that bokeh. But right now, I just want to smooth the skin as realistically as I can. It just looks a little patchy. This is going to overdo it. It'll look like a cartoon. Okay, but now I can come through, and we can go close. Whoops. Grab my white brush, 100% opacity, and smooth all this out. And this is going to be over the top, but again, we can go ahead and back down the opacity on it.
Sure.
I don't think we need any on the face. In fact, we are going to sharpen some of that, but see, it looks kind of, you know, she looks kind of rubbery there. I'm going to go ahead and lower it, the opacity on all that, and just till I can see some, we want to introduce some flaws so it looks real. So let's say right there. Okay. Next thing I want to do is come in and go to the eyes. I'm going to go to Sharpen Tool. I'm just going to take that over the eyes and lips a little bit. Now I'm going to duplicate. I am going to take a sponge tool, okay, and we're going to take it over the highlights and the clouds to the back, and then through the highlights in the water. I kind of want to stay away from the blues. I really only want these kind of pinks in the back. Any of the highlights I typically run over, even this line in the grass in the back, and run over. See that kind of start to come to life over there?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to do one other thing. I'm going to go ahead and flatten this image, and we're going to try to give some illusion of light control, like we placed her in this amazing light, which we didn't. I'm going to go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and CC. I'm going to lower the exposure on this. This doesn't always work, but we're going to try to make it work. I'm going to lower the exposure. You have to think of it almost like as a vignette, and I'm going to see if I even like it. I may not. I'm going to start from the top and just come straight down through the model. That's pretty cool. It's pretty directional, and it puts more light on her. I'm going to lower the opacity so it's a smoother transition here. And that's nice. It almost looks like there's this light coming from the top, shining down on her. Does that make sense? It's very subtle, okay? And I am going to take that. I'm going to go ahead and use that. It's like a directional vignette. And we're going to, the last thing we're going to do is a Nick layer. We're going to duplicate, filter. I'm going to go to my Nick collection, Color Effects Pro 4. This will brighten skin tones in the scene. We can put a little bit of a vignette on it, but it just kind of warms it up. Certainly so not everybody was complaining that I used, you know, something on this. Ooh, some of these are kind of cool. This is, you know, if you wanted to get more artsy, Stuff like that's cool. I chose the wrong program. I'm going to go to Filter, Nik Collection, Color Effects Pro 4. What were you going to ask?
Well, I think I asked you this once, but do you shoot in any particular kind of white balance?
I shoot on cloudy all the time. I always shoot on cloudy because it gives a little bit of a warmer color to the photos.
Okay.
Oh, okay. You know, unless I'm indoors. This is my recipe for this. I use film number 14. I moved my vignette down a little bit. A lot of people complain that I use a plug-in for this. Listen, I'll make close to $1 million this year. I'm probably gonna, if I need a plug-in to do that, I'm gonna do it. I need one. I'm not gonna piss around trying to find something that, you know, doesn't work just for people. If you're gonna be successful, spend the $150 for the program. It's worth it just in saving you time alone.
That's awesome.
It is, and not only that, but why would I want to sit here and mess with this until I could get something instead of just, look, if you can't afford $150 for a program, you're in the wrong business. You know, it's just time to work at the airport. This is the setting I use. Now look at how the skin pops out of this, right?
Oh yeah.
It's alive. And so I have my saturation set at about 25. This is all personal taste. Warmth at 67. My vignette at -14 on this. Brightness. Sometimes I will bring some grain per pixel down. And if I do that, it'll get rid of banding. Okay. And my film strength set at 3%. I'm going to bump it up probably to about 6.
Now what does that mean, film strength?
Your film strength will, the film strength will accentuate the overall effect of the film that you're putting on it. Because what I'm doing is I'm taking an analog finish or something that appears to be analog and putting it over a digital image. I want it to look more film-like. Okay, so I want to accentuate the strength of that. So think of it as the opacity of the effect. Okay. But this is pretty close to finished image. I want to see if I can't pull a little more detail out of some of this. I'm going to show you a way that we could possibly do that. And another thing I want to do is make sure I don't have to mask up any dark parts around here. This is a little dark at the bottom, and that all comes from the vignette on the film finish. I'm going to grab black. I'm going to lower the opacity to 25 and just take that across the bottom. And then I'm going to take it out of this red here too. And that way it just doesn't look so dark cornered, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so from here I'm going to flatten. I'm going to come in here and transparent layer, edit, fill. I'm going to dodge and burn, and I'm pretty sure I showed you how to do this, right?
You did, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go to transparent layer, fill that with 50% gray, switch to overlay. I'm going to grab my dodge tool, and I'm going to try to just accentuate some of these tiny highlights in here. I want this to really show her leaving the water, and I want it to show a splash. I think it's all the realism. So I'm just going to make some educated guesses on where to put this. I'm manually sharpening is what I'm doing by painting over my highlights. Because it's a little detail, or it's just a little bit of contrast, it's going to show detail. So I'm going to back out and look and see. Now that's just more amazing. I think it's a very tiny thing, but it helps bring it out a little bit. Maybe a little patchy in some areas. I'm going to back the opacity down, but I think that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful.
I'm going to save it.
I'd be one happy girl if I got that photo.
Okay, well, the point of this whole tutorial was originally to show you that not everything works out. And that was a miserable failure in this case because it worked out. You know, I want to show people that I want to try to tell people not to quit. That is the most important thing to me, literally, is not quitting and understanding that, okay, it's great. You're showing me a picture you made after working with, you know, after seeing a video of mine for 4 hours. But the work doesn't stop there. I still make mistakes. It took me 2 years to figure out how to do that, right? And then show everybody. So everybody's doing it after 4 hours. But it doesn't end there. It's constant practice. I'm far from perfect. And I'm just going to keep working on these until we get, you know, a little more realism, I just want to show, I want to be able to show images that when we're out, the eye sees, but the camera can't see. Okay, so when we're out and we shoot the scene, we can see a sky in the back. But for some reason, when we shoot it, we only see a subject in a white sky. So, you know, I'm going to be out of a job once there's a camera that comes along that's so dynamic that can do this. And there is HDR software, but capturing movement, you know, and doing HDR software is pretty impossible, especially in portraits. And also, HDR in portraits, the people look like cartoons, and you don't want that. So we're just going to take, for the time being, take our own images and blend them to come up with things like this that are high dynamic.
So what did you just do with the gradient?
I thought this was a little dark on the bottom, and I'm sorry, I should explain that. All I did was grab it. Okay, I pulled it up to here, and I just gave it a little exposure bump, a highlight bump too. And now, as I look down here, see, when I'm looking at an image, I'm looking at it up here. I want to know how dynamic it is at the size of a stamp, because that's where people are going to decide whether or not they're going to interact with this, right? I think some of this could even come off the bottom, so I am going to look at a little crop, just a little bit, because I don't want this to be confused with, you know, at this size looking like a girl is just standing there. I thought that's why it was important that we were able to show a little bit of movement in the hair, okay? And I wanted that splash to really come out too. The thing is it's great. It's really rewarding when you come up close, but we have to figure out how we're going to get somebody to engage with that to come up close in the first place. So I'm looking at this size up here and thinking, Jesus, is that interesting enough from a ways out that I'm going to want to go look at it? And so that's really important. Also, I am going to take a look at adjusting some of my highlights up here, especially on my histogram. It looks like we're missing a few, but it's okay. I don't want to bump them up to the point that this starts to band, okay? And maybe I don't need that much exposure at the bottom. Maybe I want my eye drawn more to the lighter area, which is where it's going to be drawn to, because this is really the most important part of the image. This is what tells us that she's not in the water.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, that's the image. I will go look at a little bit of vignette just to kind of localize that. But I don't want to get into any parts of this image too dark up here, and I think that's pretty cool right there. And then sometimes, just because things can come off kind of fragmented, I add a little bit of grain if I know I'm going to post this online. That'll kind of break things up. And typically they'll post better. Whether that actually works, I don't really know. But for some reason, I see less banding when I introduce some grain. Because let's say I go ahead and I post this online and I see a bunch of banding. You know, it's not attractive. So that's kind of what happens on Facebook. And not only that, but it adds, where we did some skin smoothing, it adds a little bit of texture back into the skin. So, but no, cool. It's a pretty cool image.
Oh yeah, I love it. I love it. I'm really glad that I got to.
This is the part where you tell me how amazing I am, Dana. I'm totally kidding.
No, well,
listen to me, it worked out. This one worked out, but I can't tell you how often they don't, right? You spend all this time, and getting better comes from the work. So I have screwed up 90% more than the successes I've had. So it comes from just doing the work and being okay with failing.
Yeah.
So I really want people to know that.
Yeah, you know, I mean, well, one of the things you were saying, it took you a couple years, because I was sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I have to watch this again, because even though while I'm watching you, it all makes perfect sense. I know I'm not going to remember everything. You know, it's like, now what did he do?
Well, you'll get a copy of this. So, yeah, you'll get a copy of this. But in fact, anyway, that's it for this. We had a great. No, it worked out. So anyway, Dana, I'm going to stop recording this and talk to you.